Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and today we have a top 32 breakdown for the Carta Magica online treasure cup that happened this past weekend. It was over 800 players, and we do have this top 16 that we see here today. And a couple of things before we get started. First, shoutouts to Carta Magica for not only running the event, but also for giving out the deck list, and for also live streaming it as well. It should be on their YouTube in the next couple of days. And also, bonus shout out to both Brian from Stage Zero and also the Strongest Wizard for doing the commentary for it. Really support both those guys, and I think they make really good content, so make sure to follow them here on YouTube. They're going to be linked to those in the description, but really great guys in this community. Really happy they were able to do the commentary for that event. And also, I do want to say a big thank you to people who have been supporting me here on my channel too. I do want to mention the new members that I have since the last time. So we have Mahi Ryder, Ivan, Jonathan, Christian, the Dave69, which I think I already had you there, but you showed back up for some reason. So, but also just the Dave69, Ryan, Wilson, and also Native TV. I really do appreciate all the support for the memberships here on YouTube. If you guys want to support me as well, also to see the Twitch or the VODs here, the live stream VODs, since I can do it on Twitch and YouTube at the same time, there's that. And then again, I also upload any of the large tournaments here edited down for you guys to see for free. So do appreciate it, and thank you guys for all the support. But jumping on into this event, we have a lot to kind of go over there. In this top 32, we had 7 of the OPO4 Donquixote Doflamingos, 6 Katakuri, 3 of the Star Deck 3 Crocodile, 2 of the OPO1 Law, 2 of Ace, 2 Rebecca's, 2 Star Deck 2 Eustass Captain Kid, 2 Magellan, a Queen, a Trafalgar Law from Star Deck 10, a Star Deck 8 Luffy, and a Star Deck 10 Luffy, a Star Deck 4 Kaido, and also a Rob Lucci. So this is probably one of the most diverse pie charts I've ever made for this game in the last year that we've had it, which is saying a lot for kind of what the diversity is. And I'm going to make probably a video going over kind of my thoughts about this format, since this was pretty much the last weekend of it here, at least in North America. And just kind of I think that, just the effects of the restriction list that we had and just kind of everything else. But honestly, again, one of the most diverse pie charts that we've seen, and just really shows a lot of different decks are viable right now, which I think is really cool. We also do have a bit of a glimpse for the leader breakdown. These are just kind of approximate numbers as well, and I think I misspelled approximate. I'll fix that in post, but it is the approximate leader breakdown for this. So we had 185 Katakuri, 122 of the Dofi, 67 and 57 of the new Luffy and Trafalgar Law Star decks respectively, 49 of the Eustass Captain Kid, 48 Magellan, 36 Queen, 28 Law, and 425 others. So even looking at this pie chart, the most is Katakuri, and it also just kind of I would think a lot of people say Dofi and Charlotte Katakuri are 2 of the strongest decks in the format. They're probably the most represented and also doing the best, probably because of that too. But all these numbers just make sense. Nothing seems skewed too much, which I think is really cool. And again, just a lot of decks are really viable right now, which I think is really awesome for a lot of different reasons. So we're just going to jump into the top placing list for each one of these leaders. It's going to be a bit of a longer one, so buckle up. And we're going to start off with their first place list, which was the Queen list. So this is Michael's list again, who won the entire event with this one. And we've been seeing Queen do somewhat well in the last couple months. We've seen it win tournaments. We've also seen it just completely not be in a top cut at all. So a little bit of variety there, which I think is interesting. Honestly, I didn't think that Queen was going to win again post-restriction list, because I felt like it did have a really bad matchup against Charlotte Katakuri, which as we see is pretty common. I do think that Donquixote Doflamingo, the second most common, is a winnable matchup for the deck, but it can be tricky, especially if you get locked down by the 10 drop. You can't recover that turn, which feels really bad. But otherwise, just having a lot of removal, being able to have a lot of great 8/9s is great. And since the meta is a little bit slower in general too, it does mean you do get a little bit more time to set up, which I think is nice. Deck is usually kind of standard for what we're seeing, but some new adds are probably the Boa Hancock, which wasn't, I think, in a lot of original builds for this, but this does help you late game, get some additional draw sometimes on offense too by attacking with it. It's another blocker, and again, it's never super dead in hand because it's a 1K. So I do like the add for this, since we are in a little bit of a slower meta currently. And then just a couple more blockers, including the Charlie. So it has an on play, look at the top of your and your opponent's life and place at the bottom of their life. So or sorry, R, your are R's, sorry, not the and, but being able to do that to see if your life is good or if your opponent's life is good, and also just be a blocker, I think is fine. So I haven't been seeing this as often, but being able to kind of dictate that and know what you're kind of looking for, either on your own or your opponent's, I think is worth it for, again, like a blocker that you kind of want to play anyway. So pounds are usually pretty common there, and then we have our full suite of the top end. Only one copy of Mihawk too, which is a little bit low. Normally I like to see this at like 2 or 3 copies, since it's the most consistent removal of the, I feel like the 3 of these, but it's still these guys get like a little bit more value with their removal too. So 1 through 1,000 worlds, 5 gum, red rock, and just kind of the rest here. So a bit of unique build, some unique card choices, and congratulations to Michael for their finish there. Next up, we have our second place. So this is Robert's version of Charlotte Katakuri. I don't have a lot to say about this deck. Most of these the Katakuri list are looking pretty similar in this meta. The thing I feel like I've been saying every time is that Charlotte Cracker is like a 2 to 4 of, because it does do better now that Newgate isn't in the meta anymore and isn't as like in the forefront, so it can get like some surprise action there. But honestly, other than that, it's just kind of what we've been seeing. The Charlotte Linland package, or like the Big Mom package, is pretty understood, that you just play all the cards, that search all the cards, there's consistency from there, and you just hope there's some good cards in your life when you need them to be there. So not much more to say to that, but congratulations to Robert for their second place finish there. Next up, we have our the Star Deck 10 Trafalgar Law, and this is Braden's list of it here. This is obviously one of the newer leaders on the block and this is the first weekend that this leader was viable and legal to play in as well. I've seen almost like different builds from everyone. There is kind of like the common core package of like the Jean Bart, the Sachi and Penguin, and like the 4-drop Law, as well as the Beppo. These are usually in every copy of it. Otama and Gordon, also very common, as many of either of these you can run. Zoro is usually at like 2 to 4 copies as well. It gets since it's like the only like viable card that has rush that you can play off your leader skill, is important there. I do like the Brook, though I do also agree like there's sometimes difficulty like setting up the Don -1, but if you are able to do that, you get some good spots. I do like this Trafalgar Law for what it is. It is the fact that you can play it and then use a -2, even though like it's clunky and sometimes feels like reverse order of what you want to use with your leader. I think it's in a good spot, and just a really solid deck in general. We also have like 1 copy of the Hydra, which is a Don -1, gives something -3k during the turn, and also can unramp something in the life, so that's kind of an okay trigger. And just like an alternative copy of Gordon, which I think is fine, especially since this card is really expensive in a lot of ways. You do have to do Don -1, which kind of stinks for the thing, because you do kind of need like as much Don as you can with everything else, but I think it's an okay substitution, because this card, as good as it is in a really, really expensive spot right now, and I think that it's not as affordable for everyone who wants to play this deck. And also like the Gordon and the Queen, like this is a bit of an expensive deck outright, so I totally understand that. But this list for Braden, congratulations for their finish there. Next up, we have the Starter Deck 8 Luffy. Starter Deck 10 will be much more later down the line, but this one's like always like shows up every once in a while. Pretty much since like August, it's just been pretty consistent, just showing up once in a while, but getting like the good curve and probably like some good matchups to get into this finals position. I also know that not a lot of people are on this leader too, so just the the ratio and number wise for this deck to do well is not in its favor compared to the other decks, but it does have like a really good game plan of you're able to get some really, really good tempo, being able to play stuff on curve, and also like Borsellino and Sabo, even though I think there are more and more ways to remove it. Blue has a lot of ways, as well as like Red Purple Law just can get rid of all of these cards without a KO effect, so that does get around a lot of these. But regardless of that, like I think you can set up some tempo with the Sakazuki as well as the Garp, and just since the meta is a little bit slower and you're able to set up a little bit more, I think you can take full advantage of that too. So top end is 2 copies of Isho, 2 copies of Shanks, is also 2 copies of Kuzan, so you can do the cheese play of Kuzan in the next turn playing the Shanks to get rid of your opponent's board, and then everything you KO, you get the Luffy effect there as well. But I think this is a pretty strong strategy. It is really kind of dependent on going second, I find, more times than not, and also seeing your curve on curve. But other than that, I think it's a good deck, and congratulations to Alex for their finish with this one. Next up, we have Donquixote Doflamingo, the green-purple one, which was the only one that topped this weekend, but at least for this event anyways. And this is kind of like more of like the hybrid build that we've been seeing. Most of the time, though, I would say like the top end is either like a 10-drop Donquixote Doflamingo or a 9-drop Kaido, but this is running the 8-drop Eustass Captain Kidd, which honestly I saw a really big resurgence of this card in general this weekend through a couple of events, which, you know, yesterday's Core TCG event, and I'll have another one coming out for the UK Expo as well. But this is like really great in mirror matches. It's kind of a, you know, great way to set up your own defenses. You just take your life down very quickly, and then you use this Captain Kidd to be like your second defense. So having an 8K body that at any time that you can use like a 2-cost event to, you know, help your defense with it is great. There's a lot of good cards you can play off the effect, especially since we're already kind of playing the Brook effect. So we have a good amount of these 3-cost that help us out there. Trafalgar, I am a little bit surprised we're not playing any copies of Bonnie, but I also know that like the searching for this deck is a little bit like rough to do when we don't have as much going for it. But I think that again, like the 8-drop is in a good spot right now. And you know, outside of like, you know, I think Law and Zoro had a really good time against this card because they could had so many ways to give like the minus and attack into this easier and just get value from it. But with both those decks not around as much to kind of pressure this down, and blue is just kind of around, like Red Rock gets rid of it, but it's not, I think, like as present either. It's just in a good spot. So I think it's a good pick. There's a lot of other copies of Donquixote Doflamingo as well if you guys want to see those particular. But it's interesting to see that there's a lot of like deck space still viable for this leader, even though everyone's playing like the film package. So this is Den's list. Congratulations for their top there. And then next up we do have the OPO1 Trafalgar Law, which this is Alan's list, who got 8th place with it. I do think that you know, we've kind of settled the dust a little bit of what's the more popular and stronger version of this deck, and more times than not I do see it's the Whitebeard Pirates, or some semblance of Whitebeard Pirates. I still see a lot of different ratios for a lot of different people, but there's the fact that you can use Izo and like the Thatch. This 1-drop is really nice for not only being a 1-drop that can be found off another 1-drop to help get your board a little bit wider, but also just the fact that you can use this to kind of make a quick 5K attack for cheap and then bounce it back to your hand and save the resources with it, which is cool. I do like the Haruda, which helps you get like an additional Dawn every turn, which is kind of good when also like Marco's not around. It's a little bit trickier for your opponent to get like a free KO on this outside of like the Trafalgar Law, the red-purple one. Flamenco, I like this choice too. I think is like another way to give something minus 2K power. It's Whitebeard Pirates, and you can really just set up with it too, and then Vista like combos with it fantastically. So other than that, like the same top end, and then no events for this build, no Rad Beam. You know, I've been seeing like a full suite of different options of like Rad Beam, Guard Point, Pump Gibson, Jet Pistol every once in a while too, and I think those are totally valid. If you're playing a deck that your opponent doesn't know 100% of the build, you can definitely get some free wins, or at least some free advantage by playing a card your opponent's not really expecting or playing around. But this is the list here for Alan. Congratulations for their 8th place finish with Trafalgar Law. Next up we have the Star Deck Croc. So this is Cesar's version of the build, and I think this is pretty interesting in a lot of ways. That it's just like a what we've been seeing, but we have like this super duper like tempo build of like we have Zeph, and then after that we have Sogeking or Donquixote Doflamingo, which either of these can essentially bounce back the other card they just played the previous turn, and then we have Mihawk and then Kaido. Like 4 copies of Mihawk is a lot, and I think that's just very, very strong. Being able to use this to like just prevent your opponent from building any kind of board and while setting up your own, I think leads to success. So obviously you have to see the cards on curve. If you don't get to do that, you're in a little bit of a bad spot, but there's just kind of so much there. But you don't, because of that too, we are running Set Tomorrow, but we also like, I feel like this is more of a backup plan if we don't see the good card on curve, or if we end up going second, like we can do this on 6, and then on turn 8 or 8 Dawn, we go Sogeking or Dofi, so that does help your build there. But yeah, I think that if you're able to see this consistently, there's a lot of decks that, again, like you have to make a decision. Do I want to try to remove cards from my opponent's board or try to reestablish my own board? And you'll get consistently punished throughout the game if you do that, if they're able to continue to see their top end. So this is the build here, and congratulations to Cesar for their finish with this one. Also, real quick, I do want to touch on Ryan Tisbe's version of Sardak Croc, just because it was a pretty unique build of it, comparatively for what we've been usually seeing. They did get 32nd place, so just narrowly getting into this top 32, but they are playing like the Impel down version of this. And I think that this is additionally a very strong deck. Instead of using like the more popular like Sentomaro package, we're using these cards to get like that big turn with 7 Dawn. So you can play Emporio, which can play either like the Luffy, which is helpful to get get bounce cards back to your opponent's hand. We can play a blocker. We have like a 5/5 if we need to, or even like the 5/7 Croc. So I think that's like also just really interesting. That means that we have like a turn 1 play of Buggy, which can find a lot of our cards, which is nice, including like our Gum Gum Rain and any of our like combo pieces. And then we still have room for like our traditional Mihawk, Kaido, and just our removal event cards too. So I think this was just a bit of a unique list, and I just want to shout Ryan's build for this as well. Next up, we have our Portgas the Ace. So this is the 11th place. This is Michael Nguyen's version of the deck. And honestly, like, I am still surprised that Ace is getting like some tops here and there, despite like, again, losing a lot of cards. And the fact that you're able to, get some tops with Ace, even though like Zoro's been pretty much phased out based on the last results we've been seeing, I think is really interesting in a lot of ways. But it's pretty much going into like what I would say like the Whitebeard package, whole horse, where we're playing a lot of the vanillas, including like the Atmos and the Thatch, which traditionally, like, I would say that you'd have a hard time building a board as Ace, because we just want to be able to play our removal cards like our Flame Emperors or our Fire Fist or just anything else. So being able to instead pivot to say, I can play these vanillas, which are really great, and then later if I want to or need to remove some stuff, I think that's in an okay spot. We have our one of Marco here. We don't play any of the blockers, which can be a little bit tricky as well, and then a good amount of rush with the 5/6 Luffy as well as the 7/7 Ace, and also the 10-drop Monkey D Luffy. So we can play this on 10 and feel like a little bit safer with it because of our leader effect. All of these events in hand aren't really truly dead in hand, which is really nice. And it's a really interesting build. I know that Ace is doing kind of well right now, which is really interesting, and this is one of the builds for it. So congratulations to Michael for their finish with this one. Next up, we have the Eustass Captain Kid. So this is the build from Isaiah, and Kid's been doing, I think, pretty well. I think from a film package, I think Green Purple Dofi's been doing a little bit better, but this is, I would say, like the super tempo or even like super aggressive version of the deck, since you do have like your leader effect and you do have some additional advantage from there. You only get access to one color instead of Green Purple Dofi, so you have like a half film package, but the green half is arguably the better half of it in general. So this is more of a supernova version, since we do have a good amount of film and supernova cards, including the Zoro, including the Luffy, and including the Bart, which just being able to get those double hits are really nice. And we just have like the 8-drop Eustass Captain Kid is a good card, I think, in this meta currently, until people start respecting it and have more ways to answer it. It's gonna just be obnoxious, and then just like our other like 2Ks and like blockers like the Killer, which you can play off the Eustass Captain Kid as well. So I think this has kind of been tried and true for a little bit. Obviously, newest card is the 10-drop Dofi, which 2 copies, you see it or you don't see it. And more times than not, I feel like you don't, but if you do, it can help you win games a lot of the time. So this list for Isaiah, congratulations for their top placing there. And then next up, we have Magellan, which if I was playing this weekend, I would probably be playing Magellan. I really kind of like the play style for the deck, and it is obviously some of the newer stuff, which is really, really cool. So this is Hazem's list of it here, and we do have like the new spice of like the 4 or 5 Trafalgar Law, which more than not, I do see people like not run the full 4 copies of this card, which I think is fine. It is just a blocker, and a lot of people are just kind of playing around it in the first place, so they're respecting that this card can exist. So because of that, it's less useful as a 4 of, because most of the time it's just gonna be a blocker you play, right? So I do think that's something that I've been seeing a little bit. So if you want to cut this down to 3 or 2 copies, I think it's not too bad of an idea. You also do have like the 7-drop Eustass Captain Kid, which is fantastic for this Magellan. You play it on 7 Dawn, which means your leader's a 7k during your turn and a 6k during your opponent's turn, and you can keep using the effect from then on, which is really great. So honestly, just kind of something the deck needed was a higher like power level card we can play late game that you can get your Dawn -1 effect and get some real value, which I think this card can really do. Other than that, I really do like the disruption that this Magellan can do in the match, being able to put your opponent off the kind of curve that they really wanted to be on, which is nice. And it does usually benefit you more than it benefits you more than how much it like benefits them for going the Dom minus. So I think that's great. I think Heat's a good card for this deck because it's almost always going to be a 6K and just kind of the rest of the package. So I like this list. I'm playing pretty much something very similar to this one. And congratulations to Hazem for their finish there. Next up, we have Kaido, which I think, a lot of people are saying, what is the generically good purple route? Is it Magellan or is it something with the Animal Kingdom route? And I personally still think it's Magellan, but I do respect Kaido for this one. And most of the time it comes down to like you have to see your Onigashima as soon as possible. If you don't see your Onigashima on turn 2, you feel like you've already lost. Like you're super behind and you're just missing out on like one extra Dawn every turn. So that's kind of rough for the deck in general. I think I'm also kind of surprised we're not seeing like a copy of Heat because I think like as a backup turn 2 play, it's in an okay spot since you do want to use a lot of your Dawn minus effects. We are also playing the ulti and page 1 effect package, which I don't see often, but honestly I've been seeing more and more people use this as a way to swarm board, including like in red purple law sometimes too. But other than that, we just kind of have our big boy package of our queen, our king, the Eustass kid, and then also our Kaidos, the 9-drop as well as the 10-drop, which I really do like this card in this meta. I think a lot of people aren't respecting it. Maybe they're kind of coming around to the fact that we got to play around this card because it can just get so much advantage if you're able to play it uncontested. But I think that's good. And then just kind of some ramp cards, a film Uta, and just kind of a bunch of 2Ks to help us survive there too. So I like Kaido. I think I'm still a Magellan, but both of them play a little bit differently. And again, like the tie-in package from this deck is really great. You have to see your Onigashima, and you'll have to only see one. If you see more than one of this Onigashima, sometimes you just feel like you've got no counter in your hand, which is kind of tricky for the deck. So other than that, I think Kaido's great. You just have to be a little bit fortunate with it, and definitely that's kind of what happened to Hieu. So congratulations for their finish there. Next up, we have Brian with their starter deck 10 Monkey D. Luffy, and I've been seeing a lot of builds from this deck, and it's really fun to see a lot of them are unique in their own kind of ways. There are a couple of common cards. Obviously, I think you maxed out on New Gates in your 7/8s Captain Kids. Most people are playing the All-Star Calamities, which does kind of feel bad at times, and but being able to get a ramp and like recover like the draw is good. Sometimes you just have like the weight, like the extra Dawn to do something with this, which is great. But I do like the wire. I like Missile Sunday as well, but it is a little bit tricky to play this in like the mirror match, but in the fact that you do get to just play it and draw a card and ramp when you need to get up to 8, which then you can go an extra Dawn after that, I think is good, but you just have to be careful this being like a little bit dead in hand. And we also are playing Magellan in this build too, so I think this is cool like mid game, because if you are able to get to your 8 fast enough, that means that you can just, this -1 doesn't really affect you, and it can really kind of affect your opponent. And depending on what deck they're playing, they really might not be able to get rid of this because that -2 Dawn is really rough for them. So I think that's something that's a little bit tough to do to answer for some decks. I like the wire for this. I like the basil. And the only thing is that we have like a lot of good trigger effects, and since we only have 3 life, it's kind of rare that we get to hit there. But this is a good list. I think this is a really fun deck right now, and congratulations to Brian for their finish there. Next up, we have Rebecca. So we actually had 2 Rebeccas. David Rodriguez technically placed higher, but I just don't have access to their list right now. I'll make sure to add it as soon as I can, but we're going to look at Chris Sock's list too. They had the same record, just tiebreakers are different between the 2 of them, but this is pretty common, honestly. There's not a lot of diversity that we can afford in this deck. I will say they went super duper removal with the 3000 Worlds and the Gum Gum Red Rock, and also only running 1 copy of King Kong, or Gum Gum King Kong Gun, which is not a lot. I see most people like go to like 2, 3, even 4 copies, and it's been a while since I've seen like a 1 copy version of this deck. But I get like why that's the case, sort of. I feel like you want at least 2, but I don't know. I'm not a Rebecca player. I've tried my best, and it's just not my play style. But I think this is Rebecca's it's in its own league. I think people are trying to start to adapt with it. And honestly, with purple being around, I think it's Rebecca has a little bit more presence in the meta than before Star Deck 10 was legal, which is kind of weird, but it's just kind of how that is. But this is a list from Chris. Congratulations for their top 32 there. And to wrap it up, we have Kyle with their copy of Rob Lucci. And this is, you'll see a lot of similarities to the Star Deck 8 Luffy that we saw earlier. Rob Lucci is different. Instead of like getting the extra attack power, you're a deck that can attack twice. Like that's kind of the trade-off between the two. Both of them are just more of the Navy build. In fact, no CP9s in this build at all, which is a bit wild because usually you see a little bit. Like the only card is like, well, guess what? Like the 6 King pistol, which is just our 0 counter anyways. But we do kind of have our removal. We have a good way like the Garp, the Sakazuki, and then also the Isho, Shanks, and 4 whole copies of these Kuzans, which again is a lot of copies of Kuzan. Normally just see this at 2, or even like most Rob Lucci builds that I see don't even run the card because it is a little bit expensive, but I do think we get to late game a little bit more often. I would say that probably yellow is the worst matchup for this deck, but if we're able to get like a well-timed Isho, we can kind of help like get that back to us, which I think is great. And I don't know, like we do have a lot of blockers. I think Bart is a great add to black generically. Being a 2K that's also a blocker helps you a lot. And just like Sabo, Borsellino, and kind of just the rest. We're also playing 3 copies of Ice Age, which is a pretty strong card. Like giving something -5 means that you can have a lot of ways. Like you can use Kobe, and then for 2 cards, you get to get rid of like anything that is a cost of 6 or less, or sorry, 7 or less, which is pretty good. And since Kobe doesn't like have the discard associated with him, that's great. I think Ice Age is sometimes a little bit cheesy, but also like the trigger in life is fine, so it's fine. But it's an interesting card to see. I usually don't see this in Rob Lucci either, so that's kind of all I've got for it. But congratulations to Kyle for their finish there. And that's going to be it for this video. A bit of a longer one, but that's just because of how diverse I feel like this event and this meta is in general. A lot of different decks were able to get in, and I think that's really cool. A lot of different playstyles are really viable right now, and it's just kind of a shame that this is the last weekend of this meta, at least from a competitive high-end level for North America. But that's kind of what we've got. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I appreciate you making it this far. If you have, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and make sure to be on the lookout for future events in the next couple of weeks. So that's going to be it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.